The audacity was suffocating. It wasn't just that she showed up uninvited. It was that she walked into the grand hall of the Harrington estate wearing a white gown, holding the hand of a married man, while his wife stood 10 feet away, holding a tray of appetizers. Most people would hide their shame, but Vanessa Tate didn't have any. She looked at Eleanor, the woman who had spent 10 years building this family's reputation, and laughed. "Oh, honey," she sneered, loud enough for the board of directors to hear. "The staff entrance is around the back. Let the real family handle the guests." She thought she had won the war. She thought the diamond on her finger meant she owned the room. But she forgot one thing. Never underestimate the quiet woman standing in the corner, and definitely never assume you know who signed the deed to the mansion. The chandelier in the main foyer of the Harrington estate was a monstrosity of crystal and gold, weighing nearly a ton. Elena sometimes felt that her life in this house was exactly like that chandelier. Beautiful to look at from the outside, but hanging by a precarious thread, ready to crush anyone standing underneath it if the chain ever snapped. It was the night of Arthur Harrington's 75th birthday. Arthur was not just a father-in-law, he was a titan of industry, a man who had built a shipping empire from a single fishing boat in the chaotic docks of 1970s Seattle. To the outside world, the Harringtons were American royalty. To Elena, they were a full-time job. Elena adjusted the silk runner on the long banquet table, her fingers smoothing out an invisible wrinkle. She had been awake since 4 in the morning, while her husband, Mark, was sleeping off a hangover, or whatever he called it these days. Elena had been on the phone with caterers, florists, and security teams. She was 34, but in the reflection of the hallway mirror, she looked older. Her eyes, usually a vibrant hazel, were dim with exhaustion. "Mrs. Harrington." Elena turned to see Sarah, the head housekeeper, looking distressed. "Yes, Sarah." "Is the ice sculpture melting again?" Elena asked, forcing a calm smile. "No, Mum, it's... Well, Mr. Mark just pulled up to the gate," Sarah said, wringing her hands in her apron. "Security buzzed down. They said he isn't alone." Elena felt a cold stone drop into her stomach. She knew Mark wasn't alone. Mark was never alone anymore. For the last 6 months, her marriage had been a public spectacle of humiliation. Mark Harrington, the heir apparent to the fortune, had been parading around the city with a woman named Vanessa Tate. Vanessa was 24, an influencer with a penchant for drama and a distinct lack of awareness. "It's fine, Sarah," Elena lied, her voice steady. "Let them in. It's his father's birthday. I won't cause a scene at the gate." "But, Mom," Sarah whispered, stepping closer. The security guard said, "Well, he said the woman is wearing a white ball gown. She told the guard she's the lady of the house." Elena's grip on the tablecloth tightened until her knuckles turned white. The lady of the house. For 10 years, Elena had nursed Arthur through his heart surgery when Mark was too busy partying in Vegas. She had balanced the family's private ledgers when they nearly went bankrupt in 2018. She had silenced the press, cleaned up Mark's DUIs, and kept the Harrington name pristine. And now, some girl who had only known Mark for 6 months was declaring herself the matriarch. "Let them in," Elena repeated, her voice colder this time. "If she wants to play house, let her come inside. We'll see how long she lasts." She turned back to the table, picking up a stack of silver place cards. She placed Mark's card at the far end of the table, far away from Arthur. She placed her own card next to Arthur's, at his right hand. It was a subtle power move, the only kind she had left. The sound of the heavy oak front doors opening echoed through the hall. The murmur of the early guests, business partners, distant cousins, local politicians, died down instantly. The silence was sudden and violent. Elena didn't turn around immediately. She finished placing the fork at Arthur's setting. She took a breath, inhaling the scent of expensive lilies and old money, and slowly turned to face her husband. Mark stood in the doorway, looking handsome in his tuxedo, though his tie was slightly crooked. He had the Harrington jawline, but his eyes were weak, always darting around, looking for an exit or a drink. And hanging on his arm, like a parasitic vine, was Vanessa. Sarah hadn't been exaggerating. Vanessa was wearing a floor-length white satin gown with a train that belonged at a royal wedding, not a father's birthday dinner. It was a deliberate, aggressive choice. It screamed bride. It screamed replacement. Vanessa scanned the room, her eyes landing on Eleanor. A slow, predatory smile spread across her face. She leaned into Mark, whispering something that made him chuckle nervously. Then she stepped forward, her heels clicking loudly on the marble floor. "Mark, darling," Vanessa said, her voice projecting to the back of the room. "You didn't tell me the help was still setting the table. We should have arrived later." The room gasped. It wasn't a loud gasp, but a collective intake of breath from 50 of the most powerful people in the state. They all looked at Elena. Elena didn't flinch. She smoothed her black cocktail dress, understated, elegant, professional, and walked toward them. "Hello, Mark," Elena said, ignoring Vanessa entirely. "You're late. Your father has been asking for you." "Traffic was a nightmare," Mark muttered, avoiding her gaze. He tried to pull his arm away from Vanessa, but she clamped down harder. "And who is this?" Elena asked, finally looking at Vanessa. She knew exactly who she was. She had seen the credit card statements. She had seen the Instagram posts tagged at hotels Mark claimed he was visiting for business. Vanessa laughed, tossing her hair over her shoulder. "Oh, stop it, Elena. You know who I am. I'm the woman who's making your husband happy, something you clearly forgot how to do years ago." Vanessa stepped forward, invading Elena's personal space. She reached out and flicked the fabric of Elena's dress. "Cute," Vanessa said, her tone dripping with pity. "Department store. It's very practical. But tonight is about glamour, sweetie. Maybe you should go check on the appetizers in the kitchen. Mark and I can handle the guests." Eleanor stared at her. The urge to slap the smirk off Vanessa's face was overwhelming, a physical itch in her palm. But Elena was a Harrington by marriage, and she played the long game. "The kitchen is fully staffed," Eleanor said coolly, "and guests are by invitation only. I don't recall seeing your name on the list, Ms. Tate." Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "I don't need an invitation. I'm with the future owner of this house." She squeezed Mark's arm. "Isn't that right, baby? Once your dad retires tonight, things are going to change around here." Mark coughed, looking terrified. "Vanessa, not now. Let's just get a drink." "No, let her speak," Elena said, her voice rising slightly, ensuring the nearby guests could hear. "You think Mark is taking ownership of the estate tonight? Everyone knows it," Vanessa scoffed. "Arthur is old. Mark is his only son. It's natural selection. Out with the old, in with the new. And that includes the house decor and the wife." From the top of the grand staircase, the rhythmic thud of a cane against wood echoed. Thud. Step. Thud. Step. The room fell silent again. Arthur Harrington was descending the stairs. He looked frail, his tuxedo hanging loosely on his frame, but his eyes were sharp as flint. He paused on the landing, looking down at the trio in the foyer, his panicked son, the woman in the white dress, and Elena standing with her back straight and head high. "Mark," Arthur's voice rasped, dry like old paper. "Dad," Mark said, his voice cracking. "Happy birthday." Arthur didn't smile. He looked at Vanessa, then at Eleanor. Dinner is in 10 minutes. I assume we have an extra chair. I'll have the staff bring one from the storage closet, Elena said politely. Good, Arthur said. Make sure it's a sturdy one. He turned and walked toward the dining room, offering no hug to his son, no greeting to the mistress. Vanessa leaned into Elena's ear as she passed. Enjoy your last dinner at the head of the table, Elena. By dessert, you'll be history. The dining room was a masterpiece of mahogany and candlelight. 30 guests were seated at the main table. Elena had seated herself at Arthur's right side, as was tradition. Mark was seated to Arthur's left. Because there was no assigned seat for Vanessa, the staff had awkwardly squeezed a chair in next to Mark, disrupting the symmetry of the table. Vanessa was seething. She sat there in her massive white dress, which was crunched up against the legs of the table, looking ridiculous next to the dark, formal attire of the lawyers and investors surrounding her. The first course was lobster bisque. The sound of silver spoons hitting fine china was the only noise for a while. The tension was thick enough to choke on. So, Vanessa said loudly, breaking the silence. She turned to Arthur. Arthur, 75. That's a big number. Do you have big plans for retirement? Mark tells me you're looking to spend more time in the Bahamas. Arthur didn't look up from his soup. I don't like the Bahamas. It's humid and the tax laws are irritating. A few guests chuckled. Mark kicked Vanessa under the table. Ouch! Vanessa yelped, glaring at Mark. She turned back to Arthur, undeterred. Well, you must be tired of managing all this. This big old house. It's so dusty. Mark and I were talking about renovating. Knocking down this wall here. She waved a hand vaguely at a load-bearing wall covered in 19th century portraits, and opening it up. Make it modern. More glass. More light. Eleanor set her spoon down gently. Those portraits are of Mark's great-grandparents. The wall is original to the 1920 construction. Vanessa rolled her eyes. Exactly. Old. It smells like a museum in here. A home should be vibrant. Don't you think, Mark? Mark took a large gulp of wine. I think the house has character. Character is code for needs a bulldozer. Vanessa laughed, reaching for the wine bottle herself and refilling her glass to the brim. But don't worry, Elena. When Mark takes over, we'll make sure you get a nice little condo somewhere. Maybe downtown? Somewhere easier to clean. The insult hung in the air. This wasn't just bullying. This was a public eviction notice. Mr. Henderson, the family's longtime attorney, cleared his throat. The estate is quite complex, Miss Tate. Ownership isn't exactly a simple matter of handing over keys. Oh, please, Vanessa waved him off. Mark is the son. It's his birthright. And since I'm going to be the new Mrs. Harrington soon enough. She stopped, covering her mouth in mock surprise. Oops, did I say that out loud? She looked at Eleanor with a cruel, triumphant grin. Well, cat's out of the bag. Mark proposed last week. She slammed her hand onto the table. On her finger sat a massive, gaudy diamond ring. The room went dead silent. Mark turned pale grey. He hadn't told anyone. He certainly hadn't told his wife. Elena looked at the ring. Then she looked at Mark. Her face didn't crumble. She didn't cry. She just stared at him with an intensity that made him shrink into his chair. Is this true, Mark? Elena asked. Her voice was quiet, deadly. Elena, look, I was going to tell you, Mark stammered. Things haven't been working between us for a long time. You're always working. You're always with my dad. Vanessa. She makes me feel alive. Alive, Elena repeated. I spent the last 3 years keeping you out of jail for drunk driving. I spent the last 5 years hiding your gambling debts from the board. I made you look like a functioning executive so you could keep your salary. That's not working, Mark. That's babysitting. How dare you? Vanessa shrieked, standing up. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor. "He is a king, and you treat him like a child. That's why he hates you. You're frigid, boring, and you dress like a librarian. He needs a queen, not a secretary." "Sit down, young woman," Arthur said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of a sledgehammer. Vanessa remained standing, trembling with rage. "No, I won't sit down. You're all just jealous. Look at you. You're old and irrelevant. Mark is the future, and I am his future." She grabbed her wine glass, a heavy crystal goblet filled with red Cabernet, and looked at Eleanor. "You want to know what I think of your contribution to this family?" Vanessa sneered. Before anyone could stop her, Vanessa splashed the entire glass of red wine across the table. It flew over the candles, over the centerpiece, and splashed directly onto Elena's chest and face. The dark red liquid dripped down Elena's nose, staining her black dress, ruining the tablecloth, and pooling on the expensive rug. Mark gasped. "Vanessa, what the hell?" "She needed some color," Vanessa said, slamming the glass down, shattering the stem. "Now she looks a little more interesting." Security guards stepped forward from the shadows of the room, their hands moving to their radios. Elena sat perfectly still. She wiped a drop of wine from her cheek with a napkin. Her movements were slow, deliberate. She didn't look at the stain on her dress. She looked directly at Arthur. Arthur Harrington placed his napkin on the table. He stood up slowly, using his cane for support. His face was unreadable, a mask of stone. "Mark," Arthur said. "Dad, I'm sorry," Mark babbled, standing up to try and wipe the wine off Eleanor, who swatted his hand away. "She's drunk. She didn't mean it." "She meant every word," Arthur said. "And frankly, she has forced my hand. I was going to wait until after dessert to discuss the business transition, but since Ms. Tate is so eager to discuss ownership and renovations, I think we should handle the legalities now." Vanessa smirked, crossing her arms. Finally, "Go ahead, old man. Give him the keys. And tell her to get out." Arthur looked at Mr. Henderson, the lawyer. "Henderson, bring the portfolio." Mr. Henderson opened a leather briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of documents. He placed them in front of Arthur. "Most people wait until they die to have their will read," Arthur addressed the room. "But I have never liked surprises, and I certainly don't like vultures circling me while I'm still breathing." He looked pointedly at Vanessa. "Mark," Arthur said, "you have assumed for 40 years that this empire, this house, and my money would eventually be yours. You assumed this because you share my last name." "It's my legacy, Dad," Mark said, trying to regain some composure. He straightened his tie. "I'm ready to lead. Vanessa is right. We need new blood. We need to modernize." "Modernize?" Arthur repeated, tasting the word like it was sour milk. "You haven't attended a board meeting in 9 months, Mark. The last time you visited the shipping yards was for a photo op 3 years ago." "I have people for that," Mark defended himself. "Elena handles the day-to-day." "Exactly," Arthur said. "Elena handles it." "So?" Vanessa interjected. "That's her job. She's the help, a glorified assistant. Now that Mark is CEO, he can hire a real assistant and get a real wife." Arthur opened the folder. "Mark is not the CEO." The room went quiet. "What?" Mark laughed nervously. "Dad, come on. Who else is there? Uncle Jerry is dead. It's me. I'm the heir." "You were the heir," Arthur corrected, "until 4 years ago, when I had my second heart attack." Arthur picked up a document. "I remember that night clearly. I was in the hospital for 3 weeks. Mark, you visited me once. You stayed for 10 minutes, asked if the will was updated, and then left to go to a casino in Macau." Mark's face flushed red. "I had business in Macau." You lost $200,000 in Macau, Arthur said coldly. Elena paid the debt from her personal savings so the press wouldn't find out. Vanessa looked at Elena, confused. She has savings. I thought she was poor. Arthur ignored her. During those 3 weeks, Elena slept in the chair next to my hospital bed. She ran the company from an iPad in the ICU waiting room. She negotiated the merger with the Japanese logistical team while changing my IV bags. Arthur looked at Elena. His eyes, usually hard, softened slightly. She didn't do it for money. She didn't do it for power. She did it because she respects the name. She respects the work. That's very touching, Vanessa said, bored. She's a good nurse. Send her a fruit basket. Can we get to the part where Mark gets the house? The house, Arthur said, looking around the grand dining room. The Blackwood estate. It has been in our family for 3 generations. It requires maintenance, taxes, staff management. It requires an owner who understands the value of $1. I understand money, Mark shouted. You understand how to spend it, Arthur snapped. You don't understand how to earn it. Arthur slid the document across the table toward Vanessa. It stopped right in front of her, next to the shattered wine glass. Read the top line, Miss Tate, Arthur commanded. Vanessa looked down, confident. She expected to see a transfer of deed to Mark Harrington. She squinted. Her lips moved as she read. Her confident smile faltered. Then her eyebrows furrowed. This must be a mistake, Vanessa whispered. Read it aloud, Arthur barked. Vanessa swallowed hard. Title of deed, ownership of Blackwood estate and surrounding grounds. Transferred in full to... She stopped. She looked up at Mark, then at Eleanor. To who? Mark demanded. To me, right? Or a trust in my name? No, Vanessa said, her voice trembling. It says the sole owner is Elena Harrington. Mark froze. What? And not just the house, Arthur continued, his voice booming now. The majority controlling share of Harrington Shipping was placed into a blind trust 5 years ago. The trustee, with full executive power, is Elena. You gave her the company, Mark screamed, standing up and knocking his chair over. She's not even blood. She's a nobody from the suburbs. She is the only reason you still have a credit card limit, you fool. Arthur slammed his hand on the table. Elena owns this house. She owns the land we are standing on. She owns the chair you were sitting in. And technically she signs the checks that pay for your car lease. Elena finally stood up. She was still covered in wine. Her hair was damp with it, but she looked taller than anyone else in the room. She looked at Vanessa, who was staring at the document in horror. You said earlier that I should go to the kitchen, Elena said, her voice calm and terrifyingly steady. You said the lady of the house should handle the guests. Elena picked up the wine bottle Vanessa had used. She poured herself a fresh glass. I am the lady of the house, Elena said, and you are trespassing. The silence following Elena's declaration was heavy, the kind of silence that usually precedes a natural disaster. Vanessa stood frozen, her hand hovering over the legal document as if it were radioactive. The red wine stain on Elena's dress had begun to dry, turning a deep, sticky purple. But Elena wore it like war paint. She didn't wipe it away. She wanted them to see it. She wanted every board member, every cousin, and every waiter to remember exactly who had cast the first stone. You're lying, Vanessa hissed, her voice losing its polished influencer sheen and revealing the jagged desperation underneath. She looked at Mark. Tell her she's lying, Mark. You told me you owned the shipping fleet. You told me this house was in a trust for us. Mark was hyperventilating. He loosened his tie, his face slick with sweat. He looked like a man who had just realized he was standing on a trap door. It was supposed to be. Mark stammered, looking at his father with wet, pleading eyes. "Dad, you can't do this. You can't give the Harrington legacy to her. She's a secretary. She's not blood." "She is the only person in this room who knows how to steer the ship," Arthur said, taking a sip of his water. He looked entirely unbothered by the destruction of his son's ego. "And as for blood, Mark, loyalty is thicker than blood. You proved that when you tried to embezzle $3 million from the expansion fund last year to pay off your debts in Monte Carlo." The guests gasped. This was new information. The whispers started immediately, a hive of gossip buzzing through the dining room. "Embezzlement?" Mr. Henderson, the lawyer, adjusted his glasses. "Actually, sir, we called it misallocated funds to avoid prison time for Mark. But yes, Elena caught it. Elena fixed it. And in exchange for keeping you out of a jail cell, Mark, you signed the post-nuptial asset forfeiture agreement." Henderson pulled another document from his briefcase. He held it up. "Do you remember this, Mark? You signed it in a hotel room in Las Vegas while you were sobering up. It states that in the event of infidelity or public disgrace, any remaining claim you had to the Harrington Trust is voided. Bringing a mistress in a wedding dress to your father's birthday dinner, I'd say that qualifies as both." Vanessa turned on Mark, her eyes wide with horror. "You signed away the money. You told me you were worth $200 million. "I am!" Mark yelled, his voice cracking. "I'm a Harrington. The name alone is worth millions." "The name is worth nothing if you can't access the accounts," Elena said, stepping forward. She walked around the table, the heels of her shoes clicking rhythmically on the hardwood. She stopped inches from Vanessa. "Now, about that ring," Elena said, looking down at the massive rock on Vanessa's finger. Vanessa clutched her hand to her chest. "Don't you touch it. He gave it to me. It's mine." Eleanor tilted her head. "Mark, which card did you use to buy that?" Mark looked at the floor. The Platinum Amex. "The corporate Platinum Amex," Eleanor asked, raising an eyebrow. "The one reserved for travel and client entertainment?" Mark didn't answer. He didn't have to. Elena turned to Mr. Henderson. "Mr. Henderson, as the CEO of Harrington Shipping, I am flagging a fraudulent charge on the company account. An unauthorized purchase of jewelry for a non-employee." "Understood, Ms. Harrington," Henderson said, pulling out his phone. "I'll call the fraud department and the police. Possession of stolen corporate property is a felony, I believe." Vanessa's face went white. She looked at the ring, then at the lawyer who was already dialing a number. "Wait!" Vanessa shrieked. She yanked the ring off her finger, scratching her knuckle in the process. She threw it onto the table. It spun noisily, a glittery symbol of her failed conquest, before coming to a stop next to the butter dish. "Take it. I don't want it. I didn't know he stole it." "He didn't steal it," Elena said calmly, picking up the ring and inspecting it. "He just charged it to a company he doesn't own, which makes you an accessory to fraud if you keep it." Elena dropped the ring into the pocket of her wine-stained dress. "Security will log this as returned evidence." "I'm leaving," Vanessa announced, trying to regain some dignity. She grabbed her clutch. "Mark, are you coming? We don't need them. We can go to your penthouse in the city." Elena laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "The penthouse? The one on Fifth Avenue?" "Yes," Vanessa snapped. "The one with the view of the park." "That's a corporate apartment," Elena said, "used for visiting dignitaries and partners. Since Mark is no longer an employee of Harrington Shipping as of..." She checked her watch. 5 minutes ago, he no longer has access to corporate housing. "What?" Mark whispered. "You're firing me." "I can't fire you, Mark," Elena said sweetly. "You never actually did any work, but I am revoking your access. Your keycard has been deactivated. The doorman at the penthouse has already been instructed to deny you entry." "Where am I supposed to sleep?" Mark cried out, looking like a lost child. "I suggest a hotel," Elena said, "though I would check your credit limit first. I've frozen the joint accounts." Vanessa looked at Mark with pure disgust. The illusion of the billionaire playboy had shattered, leaving only a middle-aged man with a drinking problem and no wallet. "You're broke," Vanessa screeched, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. "You dragged me here, made me wear this dress, promised me the world, and you're homeless." "Vanessa, baby, we can figure this out." Mark reached for her. "Don't touch me," she recoiled. She looked around the room, seeing the smirks on the faces of the elite guests. She realized she had become the entertainment. "Get out," Elena said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room like a knife. "Both of you, get off my property." "You can't kick me out of my childhood home," Mark shouted, trying to muster some anger to cover his fear. "Watch me," Elena said. She nodded to the back of the room. Two large men in dark suits, the head of security, Mr. Graves, and his deputy, stepped out of the shadows. They didn't look like the friendly gate guards. They looked like men who handled problems. "Mr. Graves," Elena said, "please escort Mr. Harrington and his guest to the gate. If they resist, call the sheriff. I believe we have a trespassing issue." "Yes, Mrs. Harrington," Graves said, his voice deep and rumbling. He walked over to Mark. "Let's go, sir. Don't make a scene." "I am not walking out," Vanessa screamed. "I am a social media star. I have 2 million followers. I will ruin you. I will live stream this whole thing." She fumbled for her phone in her clutch, holding it up like a weapon. "I'm going live right now. Everyone is going to see how cruel you are." Elena didn't flinch. She just looked at Mr. Graves. Graves gently but firmly took the phone from Vanessa's hand. "Hey, that's my property," Vanessa yelled. "You are recording on private property without consent," Graves said, tapping the screen to turn it off. "We will return this to you at the public road." He grabbed Vanessa's arm. She thrashed, her white dress tangling around her legs. Mark, defeated, hung his head and allowed the deputy to lead him away. As they were dragged toward the heavy oak doors, Vanessa screamed one last insult. "You're just a bitter old hag, Elena. You'll never be happy. You're just the wallet now." Elena watched them go. The doors slammed shut with a final, resonant boom. The silence returned to the dining room. Elena stood there, wine dripping from her hem onto the floor. She took a deep breath, her shoulders sagging slightly, now that the adrenaline was fading. Arthur cleared his throat. He raised his glass. "To Elena," the old man said, his voice unwavering. "The only person in this family with a spine." The guests, hesitant at first, slowly raised their glasses. "To Elena." Elena nodded to them. Then she turned to Sarah, the housekeeper. "Sarah," Elena said softly, "I'm sorry about the rug. Can we get the cleaners on it in the morning?" "Of course, ma'am," Sarah said, beaming with a mixture of pride and shock. "I'll get the stain remover." "And Sarah." "Yes, ma'am?" "Change the locks," Elena said. "Tonight." The morning after the party, the sun rose over the Harrington estate, illuminating the dew on the perfectly manicured lawns. Inside, however, the atmosphere was anything but peaceful. Elena sat in Arthur's study, her study now. The desk was an enormous slab of mahogany that smelled of lemon polish and old tobacco. She was wearing a crisp navy suit, her hair pulled back in a tight bun. The wine-stained dress was in the trash. The sentimental Elena, the one who tried to save her marriage for 10 years, was gone. The CEO was in charge. "Report," Elena said, not looking up from her laptop. Mr. Henderson sat across from her, along with the company's PR crisis manager, a sharp-eyed woman named Chloe. "It's messy," Chloe admitted, sliding a tablet across the desk. Vanessa Tate didn't go quietly. She went to a motel down the highway and spent the entire night posting videos. She's spinning a narrative. Elena picked up the tablet. On the screen was a TikTok video of Vanessa. She wasn't wearing the white gown anymore. She was in a bathrobe, looking disheveled, tears streaming down her face, though Elena suspected they were aided by eye drops. The caption read, "Kicked out onto the street by the evil witch. Abuse. Justice for Mark." "Guys," Vanessa sobbed in the video, "I just wanted to support the man I love. And his family. They attacked me. His wife threw wine on me. She stole my engagement ring. She's holding Mark's inheritance hostage. We have nowhere to go. Please, we need help." The video had 3 million views. The comments were a cesspool of vitriol against Eleanor. "Eat the rich. That wife sounds toxic. Mark needs to sue. She's controlling the narrative," Chloe said. "The public loves a Cinderella story, even if the Cinderella is a homewrecker. They see a crying girl and a mean rich wife. We need to issue a statement." Elena watched the video again. She watched Vanessa's fake tears. She watched Mark in the background, sitting on the motel bed, looking hungover and pathetic. "No statement," Elena said. Chloe blinked. "Elena, if we don't respond, the stock price might wobble. Investors get nervous about family drama." "We don't respond with words," Elena said, standing up and walking to the window. She looked out at the estate grounds. "We respond with receipts." She turned back to Henderson. "Mr. Henderson, release the security footage." Henderson raised an eyebrow. "The footage from the foyer. All of it," Elena ordered. "The footage of her walking in uninvited. The audio of her calling me the help. The footage of her splashing wine on me first. And most importantly, the audio of Mark admitting to the embezzlement." "That's aggressive," Henderson noted, "releasing private family matters to the press." "They aren't private anymore," Elena said cold. "She made them public when she hit record on that live stream. If she wants a reality show, let's give her the unedited cut." "And Mark?" Henderson asked. "It will destroy his reputation permanently." Elena paused. She thought about the man she had married, the man she had loved. Then she thought about the look on his face when he realized he was broke. Not fear for her, but fear for his own comfort. "Mark destroyed his reputation the moment he walked into my house with another woman in a bridal gown," Elena said. "Upload it." 3 hours later, the internet broke. The official Harrington Shipping social media channels released a video titled, "The Truth About the Harrington Incident." It was brutal in its clarity. The high-definition security cameras captured everything. The world saw Vanessa strutting in with her nose in the air. They heard her cruel insults. They saw her throw the wine glass with malicious intent. They saw Elena's calm, stoic reaction. But the nail in the coffin was the audio of Arthur Harrington. The world heard the respected patriarch listing Mark's failures, the gambling debts, the incompetence. They heard Mark whine about his credit card. The tide turned instantly. The comments on Vanessa's video shifted from support to mockery within minutes. "Wait, she threw the wine first? What a liar. The wife is a boss. Look at how calm she is. Mark is a loser. He's 40 and crying about his dad's money." Team Elena. By noon, Vanessa had deleted her account. Elena was eating a salad at her desk when her phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. She knew who it was. She answered on speaker. "Elena?" Mark's voice was small, shaky. "Hello, Mark," Elena said, taking a bite of a cucumber. "I assume you saw the video." "You ruined me," Mark whispered. "I can't go outside. There are paparazzi at the motel. They're laughing at me." You wanted to be famous, Mark. Vanessa said you were a king. Kings get attention. I have no money, Elena. The hotel is kicking us out in an hour because the credit card declined. Vanessa, she left. Elena stopped chewing. She left? She called an Uber 10 minutes ago. Mark sounded on the verge of tears. She said she doesn't date broke losers. She took the laptop. She took my watch. Well, Elena said dryly, at least she has consistent values. Elena, please, Mark begged. Let me come home. I'll apologize. I'll do anything. I'll go to rehab. I'll sign whatever you want. Just don't leave me out here. I'm your husband. Elena looked at the empty chair across from her desk. She imagined Mark sitting there, making promises he would break in a week. She felt a phantom ache in her chest, the ghost of the love she used to have. But then she looked at the stack of work on her desk, the work that kept 5,000 employees paid, the work that kept the ships moving. She needed a partner, not a dependent. You have a trust fund, Mark, Elena said. A very small one. It pays out $2,000 a month. It's enough for a studio apartment and groceries. If you get a job, you might even be able to afford cable. 2,000. I can't live on that. Most people do, Elena said. Consider it your first lesson in the real world. I'll have Mr. Henderson send the divorce papers to the motel front desk. Do not come to the estate, Mark. If you trigger the gate alarm, the police will be called. Goodbye. She hung up the phone. She sat in the silence for a moment. She expected to feel sad. Instead, she felt lighter. The chandelier in the hallway didn't feel like it was about to fall anymore. The drama with Mark was personal, but the real war was just beginning. The business world smells blood in the water, and the scandal at the birthday party had released a lot of it. 2 days later, Elena walked into the Harrington shipping headquarters in downtown Seattle. The glass skyscraper reflected the gray sky. She wore a white suit today, a symbolic reclaiming of the color Vanessa had tried to weaponize. As she stepped off the elevator onto the executive floor, the tension was palpable. The secretaries stopped typing. The junior analysts looked down at their shoes. Elena walked straight to the boardroom. She pushed the double doors open. The table was full. 12 men in expensive suits turned to look at her. At the head of the table sat Cyrus Vance, a minority shareholder who had been trying to oust the Harringtons for a decade. He was sitting in Arthur's chair. "Gentlemen," Elena said, her voice echoing in the acoustic stillness. "You started the meeting without me." Cyrus smiled, a shark-like baring of teeth. "Elena, we were just discussing the instability of the current leadership. Given the recent viral videos, the board feels that the Harrington name has become a liability. We are moving for a vote of no confidence." Elena didn't sit. She walked to the head of the table. She looked at Cyrus until he shifted uncomfortably. "Get out of my chair, Cyrus," she said. "This is the chairman's seat," Cyrus argued. "Arthur is retired, and you're dealing with a divorce and a PR nightmare. We think it's best if you step down to handle your domestic issues." There it was. The misogyny veiled as concern. They thought she was weak because her husband had cheated. They thought she was distracted. Elena laughed softly. She placed her briefcase on the table and clicked it open. "The PR nightmare is over," Elena said. "Our stock is up 4% this morning because the market loves a strong leader who cuts dead weight." Mark was dead weight. "I cut him." She pulled out a file. "As for you, Cyrus, you think I haven't been watching the books while I was nursing Arthur?" Cyrus frowned. "What are you talking about?" "Project Bluefin," Elena said. The color drained from Cyrus's face. "You've been routing shipping contracts through a shell company in the Caymans," Elena explained to the rest of the board. inflating fuel costs by 15% and pocketing the difference. I have the ledgers. I have the emails." She slid the file down the long table. It stopped in front of the board's ethics committee chair. "I didn't bring this up before, because I didn't want to spook the investors," Elena said. "But since you want to talk about instability, let's talk about federal indictment for corporate fraud." Cyrus stood up, his hands shaking. "You can't prove that." "I already sent the proof to the SEC this morning," Elena lied. She hadn't sent it yet. It was her bargaining chip, but Cyrus didn't know that. "You have two choices. Resign immediately, sell your shares back to the family trust at market value, and retire to play golf. Or stay in that chair and wait for the FBI to walk through those doors." The room was silent. The other board members looked from Eleanor to Cyrus. They were predators, but they knew when a bigger predator had entered the room. Cyrus looked at the door. He looked at Eleanor. He saw the same steel in her eyes that Arthur Harrington had possessed 40 years ago. He grabbed his jacket. "I'll have my resignation on your desk by noon." He stormed out of the room. Elena watched him go. Then she looked at the empty chair at the head of the table. She sat down. She adjusted the microphone. "Now," Elena said to the remaining stunned men, "let's talk about the Q3 expansion into the Asian markets. I have some ideas." The meeting lasted 3 hours. Elena commanded every minute of it. When she finally walked back to her office, she was exhausted, but her mind was clear. She sat at her desk and looked at the photo frame turned face down on the corner. She turned it over. It was a picture of her and Mark from their wedding day, 10 years ago. They looked happy. She picked up the frame. She didn't throw it against the wall. She didn't smash it. She simply opened the back, took the photo out, and fed it into the shredder. Whirr! The strips of paper fell into the bin. "Mrs. Harrington." Elena looked up. It was her assistant, a young woman named Sophie. "There's a woman in the lobby to see you," Sophie said, looking nervous. "She says she knows you. She says her name is Vanessa." Elena raised an eyebrow. The audacity was truly bottomless. "She says it's an emergency," Sophie added. "She looks rough." Elena considered telling security to throw her out. But curiosity, and perhaps a desire for final closure, got the better of her. "Send her up," Elena said, "but keep the door open, and have Mr. Graves stand outside." 5 minutes later, Vanessa Tate walked into the CEO's office. She was unrecognizable from the woman in the white ball gown. She was wearing jeans and a stained sweatshirt. Her hair was messy. Her makeup was smeared. She was carrying a beaten-up duffel bag. She stood in the middle of the luxury office, looking around at the view of the city Elena owned a piece of. "Well," Elena said, leaning back in her chair, "you're not wearing white today." Vanessa didn't offer a snappy comeback. She just started crying, real tears this time. "He left me," Vanessa sobbed. "Mark. He found me at the coffee shop. He screamed at me. He blamed me for everything. He tried to hit me." Elena's expression didn't change. "Mark has a temper when he doesn't get his way. You would know that if you had dated him for more than a few months." "I have nowhere to go," Vanessa said, wiping her nose on her sleeve. "My parents won't talk to me after the video. I lost my apartment because I broke the lease to move in with Mark. I have $12. She looked at Elena with pleading eyes. "You won. You have everything. The house, the money, the job. Can you help me? Just a bus ticket home. Please, woman to woman." Eleanor stared at her. This was the woman who had humiliated her in her own home. The woman who had called her the help. "Woman to woman?" Eleanor repeated. "You didn't treat me like a woman, Vanessa. You treated me like an obstacle." "I know," Vanessa wept. "I'm sorry, I was stupid. I thought money was everything." Elena opened her drawer. She pulled out her checkbook. Vanessa's eyes lit up with hope. Elena wrote a check. She ripped it out and held it up. "This is a check for $500, Elena said. "It is enough for a bus ticket to wherever you came from, and a few hot meals." Vanessa reached for it. Elena pulled it back. "But before I give it to you, I want one thing." "Anything," Vanessa said. "You will sign a non-disclosure agreement," Elena said, pulling a document from her file stack. "You will never mention the Harrington name again. You will never speak to the press. You will never write a book. You will disappear." "I'll sign it," Vanessa said immediately. "I just want to go home." Elena pushed the paper and a pen across the desk. Vanessa signed it with shaking hands. Elena handed her the check. "Goodbye, Vanessa," Elena said. "If I see you in Seattle again, the next check I write will be to a lawyer to sue you for every penny you ever earn." Vanessa took the check and ran out of the office. Elena watched the door close. She didn't feel triumphant. She just felt done. She turned her chair to face the window, looking out over the city lights coming on in the twilight. She was alone at the top. It was quiet. It was peaceful. And for the first time in 10 years, the view belonged entirely to her. 6 months had passed since the infamous birthday dinner. The Harrington estate was quiet now, but it was a peaceful silence, not the suffocating tension of before. The winter snow had melted, revealing the manicured gardens where Eleanor now sat having tea with Arthur. The changes were subtle, but significant. The gaudy portraits Mark had insisted on hanging in the West Wing were gone, replaced by local art Elena admired. The staff walked lighter, no longer afraid of Mark's drunken outbursts or Vanessa's impossible demands. "I heard from him," Arthur said, breaking the comfortable silence. He didn't need to specify who. Elena blew on her tea. "Oh, how is he?" "He's working at a marina in Florida," Arthur chuckled, shaking his head. "Scrubbing boat decks. He says it's hard work. I told him it builds character. He asked for money. I sent him a pair of work boots." Elena smiled. It wasn't a smile of malice, but of closure. Mark was finally learning the lessons he should have learned at 18. He was no longer her burden to carry. "And you?" Arthur asked, looking at her with genuine paternal affection. "You saved the company, Elena. You saved this house. But are you happy?" Elena looked out over the estate. She thought about the board meetings she now led with confidence. She thought about the quiet evenings she spent reading without fear of a scandal erupting on her phone. She thought about the freedom of owing nothing to anyone. "I am," Elena said honestly. "I finally feel like I'm living my own life, Arthur. Not just fixing someone else's." Arthur nodded, satisfied. "Good. Because I'm changing my will again." Elena raised an eyebrow. "I'm leaving the rest of it to you," Arthur said. "Not as a trustee, as my daughter. You were the only one who stayed when the ship was sinking. You deserve to be the captain." Elena reached out and squeezed the old man's hand. She didn't need the money, but the validation, the acknowledgement that she was seen, valued, and respected, was worth more than the estate itself. She had walked through fire, wine, and betrayal, and she had come out the other side not as a victim, but as the matriarch she was always meant to be. What a roller coaster of a story. Elena's journey from the overlooked wife to the powerhouse CEO is the ultimate example of why you should never underestimate a quiet person. Mark and Vanessa thought they held all the cards because they were loud and flashy, but they forgot that real power lies in competence, loyalty, and owning the receipts. It's satisfying to see instant karma hit so hard. Mark scrubbing decks and Vanessa left with nothing but a bus ticket is exactly the justice they deserved. I'd love to know what you think. Did Eleanor do the right thing by cutting Mark off completely, or was she too harsh on him? And would you have helped Vanessa with that bus ticket, or let her walk? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice and revenge, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to share this video with a friend who loves a good drama, and make sure you are subscribed with the notification bell turned on so you never miss our next story. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.